my name is Klaudia. I'm been living in Sweden for like 5 years. I have a background in physics and started coding like around 5-6 years ago. I run a startup that's called Jolint, and we are developing a tool to help companies become more inclusive in a data-driven way. And actually, how I started to get into coding was that I had some courses at university, but they were like really really boring, and I really didn't get anything. And then I had a course in social network analysis, and felt like, wow, this is what I want to do. And I realized that I need to have to learn how to code to actually do that. So that was kind of my motivation to get into it. And I always felt like a bit of, or I still do feel a lot of imposter syndromes towards, oh wow, I'm not good enough at coding and so on. But I feel like it's really important to come to it with like, if you have like a real life problem that you want to solve with code, it will help you, like not just to keep you motivated in learning, but also I think it's like a really good motivation. So don't see that as like a, something negative. Also feel free to add me on LinkedIn. But why should you learn Python? It's used a lot in data science and AI. I think it's one of the most common programming languages. It's relatively easy to get started, I would say. Like, I don't want to say it's super easy and then people feel like frustrated because they don't know, like, because there's a lot of problems in the beginning. So it's still like, of course, a bit of a struggle in the beginning, but it's relatively easy, I would say. Another very positive thing is that it's really, really flexible. It's open source. There's a lot of libraries. I will tell you what that is, we'll see, but that's basically code that other people have written and made available that you can use directly. And that's like a really, really strong site. And it's also fun. So let's get into it. So how do you actually use Python? There is like a lot of ways to install it, and it depends on what computer you have and so on. But usually one good way is to use by installing Anaconda. You'll find a lot of tutorials. You can use a so-called IDE, where that's like a more professional developer environment, like Visual Studio Code or PyCharm. But what we will do today is something where you do not need any installation. You can run it directly in the browser, and that's also a great way to get started, so that the frustration of installing and things not working is a bit minimized. But if you want to get like more into deeper development, then definitely maybe look into Visual Studio Code or PyCharm. So we will use Google Colab. I'll show you in a second how to do it, but also, like, why should you use Python? I mean, I started a company and built a product based on it after learning it for some years. But there's also a lot of other fun stuff. All of these examples I have done, these are not my pictures though, but these are all like fun little projects that you can do in like a few hours to a few days. Like, for example, create those street maps, or your travel map, or download data from somewhere and analyze it. And I think that's like a really good way of actually learning Python, to find a problem that you want to solve and just get into it. But let's get started. So exactly, I posted the link, and Brittany posted it again in the comments. You just go to it, go like just copy the link, and then you will see this notebook, and then you can click on, like, it will show here, you can click on copy to drive, because then you get your own copy in your own drive, and you can run it right now and work with me through it. Please let me know if that doesn't work. But okay, let's get started. It's like actually quite easy to get started. Again, we're using Google Colab, and like, how does coding work? It's basically text and text files, and then you run it. And in Google Colab, you can run it line by line, so you don't have to write like a whole program and then run it, but you can just try it out line by line. For example, the famous print hello world, and I run this directly and I get the output directly. And you can also do that either by clicking on this little pile, or by using Shift and Enter, and you can run it in your own copy now. Let us know if that doesn't work. But basically, great. Basically, let's get into one concept. I thought I'll go through like some concepts, not in detail, but just to give you a little bit of input, and then you can go through it again tomorrow or another time and go a bit deeper. But one important concept in any programming language, but especially in Python, are variables. And variables is basically a way of storing information. So Python has like data types, for example, integers, that's just a number. And by writing a equals 10, that's not a mathematical equation, but that's an assignment. So I'm not saying a equals 10, but I'm saying I'm assigning the value 10 to the variable a. And the cool thing with Python is, if you're, have experience in other programming languages, in Python you don't need to declare what type of variable it is. It will understand it automatically. It understands that this is an integer. And if I want to actually write it on the output, then I use the print command. So I tell the computer I want to print out the variable that is stored in A. Another variable type is a float, that is like a number that's not a whole number. And I can again just run this and see what is B. Yeah, it's 10.5. Another variable, another data type is a string, and the string is basically text. But this is also text, right? Like B, for example, and name is also text, but it's without parentheses. So that means that those are variables in Python. That's a common mistake, that you forget to write the parentheses around strings, and then it's a mess up. But basically, I can store any type of text within writing it as a string. And if I print it out, it just prints the name, for example, Python. Another data type is a Boolean, and that can only have two values, either true or false. And here with the two equal signs, that's actually like a mathematical equal. So I'm seeing, is A equal B? And that is of course false, because A is not equal B. A is 10 and B is 10.5. So this would be a Boolean value. Basically, I've stored the value 10 in A and can reuse it later on. So how any programming really works is that it goes step by step. So if I have to assign A before I can actually use it. But what can I do with this? We will, like, this tutorial will use like a lot of numbers, but yeah, that's not the only thing and like a lot of math stuff, but that's not the only thing you can do with Python. It's just like a bit easier to get started. You can also do a lot of operations on text. But just a warning, it will be some numbers here. But you can do like basic arithmetic operations. For example, 7 plus 9 equals 16. 7 times 9. And I can also just save, like write a formula basically, and assign a new variable. So Python calculates a divided by b with the stored values a and b, and then it saves that under c. So a was 10 and b was 10.5, and yeah, we get that. Or I can also do arithmetic operations on some texts. For example, plus means that I just add text to each other. So name was Python that we saved here. So this will be Python is fun. So that's like the first basic thing what you can do. You can actually do arithmetic operations, store variables, store different types of data, and then do operations with them. But let's dig a bit deeper. There's a lot of data structures in Python, lists, tuples, dictionaries. They're all fun. I will just go into lists, but we advise that there's also other data structures. Lists are very versatile in Python, and it's basically to store a collection of items. So I can store numbers, but I can also store text strings. I can store lists of lists. They are ordered. That means every element in the list has a specific position. That's very important. And they are also changeable. So I can change one element in the list without having to create a new list. And it's possible to store duplicates, so I can have the same element several times. One example for a list, and again, I use a variable, fruits. That's just a random word to store the list. And my list consists of apple, banana, cherry. All three are strings. And a list I always make with these square brackets. So square brackets means list. I run it, and here I print out the list, apple, banana, cherry. Another list I call numbers. Now I spoiled it a bit, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So what can I do now with this list? And as I said, they are ordered, so every element has a fixed position. And I can, for example, access a specific element. And I do that with those square brackets again. So numbers is the list, and I open these square brackets, and I want to get the item that sits at position 0. And Python starts with 0. So the first element is actually on index 0. So that's also important. Every list actually starts with index 0. So this would be, what would be at position 0? It's number 1. And in the same way, I can add some more code here. You can just add more code here and try things out. For example, numbers at position 6, and that is the number 7. Or I can use fruits. Which one is the first fruit in this list? And it's apple. So with this brackets, I can navigate the list and pick like specific elements. There's also other ways. For example, all fruits from 0, fruits are a bit boring, numbers. From element 0 to element 3, so this is called slicing. So I'm just taking a certain slice of the list. And there's others of those. So I can basically access elements in the list one by one. But I can also assign new values to lists. This is also important in a lot of operations. For example, I want to assign a new value to the fifth item. So to numbers 4, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, to this, instead of this 5, I want to have 10. So I can just say numbers 4, like element at position 4, will be, I want it to be 10 now. So I do that, and now the 5 is gone, and we have the 10 instead. This doesn't make the list any longer, it just exchanges elements. If I want to add a new list, or a new element to the list, I can just use append, like add at the end. And this is a function, so it's not in square brackets, but in curly brackets. So I want to, for the list numbers, I want to add 8 at the end. And now now the 8 is at the end. And if I run this again, for example, then I have one more 8 at the end. So I have, like, the numbers is updated all the time. And I can calculate how long is this list by using len numbers. And now it's 9 elements long. So it goes from 0 to 0 to 1, 0 to 8. Yeah, are there any questions so far? Just if it's shared. Yes.
Yes. No questions so far.
Okay.
Python is so much nicer than JavaScript already. I love the way you slice, erase.
Yeah, it's very straightforward in many ways. Like yeah, you don't need to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you already know a programming language, then this tutorial might be a bit boring. But yeah, just also saying that.
I think it's still beneficial to learn
Yeah.
the basics of syntax and how lists work and how variables work in a different language. So this is beneficial for me. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Can you add multiple numbers to that line? Yeah, you can, but you would usually not. You can by doing this, like number 0 to 3 equals 3 or 5, I think. Yes, you can. The question was if you can add multiple numbers to that line. You can, but then you have to say, like, this position 1 to 3. What you would also usually do is use this in a loop or something and then do it one by one. We'll get into that now. So the next thing, what you can actually do with things is so-called control structures. And there's also a lot of them, but we'll go into two, or not a lot of them, but we'll look into two, which are if statements and for loops. An if statement is basically that you check if a condition is true or false. Again, that's a Boolean, like we did up here. This is basically checking if a condition is true or false. And then you do something. And that's really like a fundamental part of basically any programming, like this logical structure that is below everything. But one simple if statement is, I have a number x, I assign it the value 10, and then I check if x is bigger than 5, then I should print it. Otherwise, I'm not doing anything. So what will happen here? Let's see. Yeah, it actually prints that x is greater than 5. If I assign the value 4 to x, 4 is not bigger than 5, so it will not print anything. So one basic control structure is if. What I can also do is else. That is basically if this is not true, then I can print x is smaller than 5 or equal. And
can you run through the first exercise? It says loop through a numbers list for each element, check if bigger than 6, if true, print number, like how you would walk through doing that.
Yes, I will. I thought I'll yes, I will do that in a second. I actually have the solution in another file. But so the if statement, if or else, what's important here is that I need an indentation. I always mess up that word, but I basically need to tab, use tab, so it's not at the same, this statement after this line after the if loop, after the if, like everything in the if loop is a bit like further into the page. That's very important in Python. To always have that right. And the same is for the for loop, our next structure. And it would not run anyways. I can show you what happens if it's not intended. Then it says indentation error. Because why? It's because you basically structure what is part of the if loop and what is not. For example, I can write it like this and then say print hello, and then I print hello here. So this will be executed only if the else is happening, and this will be executed anyway. So I only get like one hello here. But if it's 4, then I get 2 hellos, because 1 here and 1 here. So the indentation shows you where does the else stop. And you can also have several print big. You can also have several nested loops, and then like every loop has its own position. Okay, I don't want to confuse you too much, but let's go to the next one and then to the exercise. The for loop. A for loop is basically usually looping through a list, for example. So we had our list of fruits. So what this does is it has the list. Also, when I hover here, then I can see what is my list of fruits. It consists of 3 items: the apple, banana, and cherry. So for each element in this list, it does something. And we call that fruit for fruit in fruits, but that's just like a random name. I can use anything. I can use I or N or whatever. But I like this fruit here is basically every element in the list. So for every element in the list, I do something. And here I just print it out. Like I print out apple, banana, and cherry. Yeah, we have 2 exercises. I thought I'll give you a few minutes to try it out, and then I'll go through it step by step. But the first exercise is that we use our numbers list. You need to run all the codes in order to for the numbers list to be there. You need to actually assign it. But we had this list of numbers here, and so I can just use it. Mine might look a bit different than yours because I assigned it a few more elements, but that doesn't matter. And with using if and for loops, try to write a loop. Yeah, it already says it. And for each element in the loop, check if it is bigger than 6, if the element is bigger than 6. If yes, then print that number. So I thought you can just write it like here in the next, try it out here. I thought I'll give you a few minutes and then we go through it. If that is too boring, we have a more advanced exercise. That's for a given number of x, so you basically assign a number, like here, x equals something. Write a code that sums up all the numbers between 0 and x minus 1. For example, for 5, it should sum up 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that is 10. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes and I'll see the questions. I can create the second line of code. So you just write something and then you enter. And if you want a new line, then you hover, like a new of these code blocks, then you hover here and just add one. So you just use enter.
I'm trying to do, but I keep getting syntax error. Expected else after if expression.
What are you running?
The first loop exercise. Loop through numbers list for each element, check if bigger than 6, true, print number. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, I will. In 1 minute. Oh yeah, Anaconda. Yes, I'll get back to that at the end, I think. I was working as a teaching assistant in a few courses, and it always takes like 2 hours just to get everybody set up with the right installation. So it's a bit complex. It depends on what computer you're using and so on. But that's where also using Colab, because you can just get started. But I also have I have a whole folder with this code and also with the solution and the presentation. I just posted it in the chat, so if you want to spoil, then do it. But I'll walk you through the first exercise. I did it before. So it's basically, it says like for loop through our numbers list, so for number in numbers. So again, this is just a random variable that I'm assigning, but like just a random name that I'm using. But for every element in the numbers list, I do something. I check if the number, so this same name, is bigger than 6, then I print it. Otherwise, I don't do anything. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, I have not run everything, so that's why it's not gonna give me. Yeah, here it's, for example, also an important thing on how to learn Python. Try to read the error messages, and there will be a lot of errors, and there's a lot of errors for me as well, I think, for any developer. But the thing is just to, like, you're getting better and better at actually fixing errors. That means you're getting better at programming. And
Absolutely.
to look for help. So don't get panicked if there's errors. That's how you learn. But yeah, I run it again, and it just prints 7. with this number. If I would add new, like run the code that I run before and add like a few 8s and a 10, then it would actually print more. Did that work for you, or was that okay? There is always like, first of all, there's always different, if you get the same error as me, then you haven't, like, you actually have to run these, like click on this little pile. You actually have to run these cells, because otherwise you don't have the numbers assigned. But this is the solution. Again, there's like different ways of doing things. It's not necessarily better, and there's also a million possible errors in everything. But I'll just go quickly through the next exercise, which is a bit more advanced, so don't worry if you didn't get it yourself, but I'm basically assigning. So for example, for 5, I want to calculate 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and then return that as a sum. And for example, x is 100. I just assign a variable x to 100. This is a common thing to do. I set like a working variable kinda to 0. So to sum up, I have to start somewhere. So I'm setting like a random name total to 0, and then I loop through. This is a new thing, range x. Range means list range 100 means that I'm just writing out, like making a list of every element from 0 to that number. That's super useful in, like, this range thing is super useful in any function, any loop really. And for every I in this loop, I'm adding it to the total. So I'm starting with 0. For the first round, it will be 0, 1, sorry. No, 0. I'll start with 0. Python always starts with 0. So it will be 0 equals, I'm assigning a new value, not the mathematical equation again. 0 plus 0 is still 0. Then I go to the next loop, and that would be 1. So for 1, I assign total equals 0 plus 1, so it's 1. And the next loop is total equals 1 plus 2, and so on and so on and so on, until I'm done with all the numbers. And I'll see for 5, because we calculated it by hand, if it's right, and yeah, it returns 10. I'll remove this, or maybe not. And that brings us to the next little thing I want to go into. We don't have super much time left, but what you can, like, you can write these lines of codes, a combination of for loops and if statements and else and so on. But what you can also do is to put it into functions. Functions are basically reusable blocks of codes. So you define something that you want to do many times with different variables. And it's a bit like also I spelled it wrong. It's a bit like a mathematical function. So I have something as an input, and I do something with it and get an output usually. And I write functions by writing definition space, and then here, for example, I put the same code. I want to reuse it. The same code that calculates the sum of numbers, I put it into a function. So I take x, that can be any x, doesn't have to be 5, as an input, and I return the sum of all the numbers that are smaller than it. So I just use the same code, I put it in the function. Again, it's intended. Everything that's in the function is intended. If I remove that, then it's outside of the function. And I have to set this total, like this working variable, to 0. And then I just loop through the through all the numbers again. And then, new thing, I have to return total. So it's kind of like print, but it's basically like if I'm using the function, and that's why I write it, because I want to use it, I'm gonna assign it to the variable. I'll show you that in a second. But let's first see if it works. So if I just write it like that, so I'm using the function sum of numbers, and I use 15 as an input. And here we have square brackets, curly brackets, and it's a curly brackets. That means that's the input to the function. I'll see if it works. It doesn't, because I haven't run this code, so it doesn't know what is this function that you defined. But now it returns 105. If we use it for 5, then it's 10. If you have the same code as me and my exercise number 2 gave me 5, did you use 5 as the x? Did you use what could be the error? Are you printing maybe I'm sure there's some small thing like a plus is maybe. It seems like it might return like just the last I. I don't know. Oh yeah, print is intended. Yeah, good point. I don't know what it is. You figure it out, I think. But let's continue with since we have 10 minutes, let's continue with what the function is. So I basically, want these reusable blocks of code. They can be really long, they can be really short. And then I can call the function. This is called calling a function with a certain input. And now I don't have to write like x equals 5, but I can really like instantly use it as an input. And it returns the total. But why is this not the same as print? I could also write print here. It's because I usually want to use functions in other functions or like in other parts of the code. And here I assign to the, like we did in the beginning where I wrote a equals 5 or something, I'm assigning something to the variable a. And here I'm assigning the result of the function, so what the function returns to a. And then I can do stuff with that. Then it's like normal, it's the same as if I would have just assigned like this number to a. So I can reuse the stored variable. For example, I can add 5 to that and then print c. If we look again, what is the sum of numbers? It's 105 of 15, and I'm assigning, I'm adding something to it, and then I'm printing. So I'm assigning something new to C. So these are like the basic building blocks. These are like the basic building blocks of any code in Python, really, that you have different functions. And it's good to know. I will, oh yeah, this is the exercise. I don't want to show you the solution, but here we have the same thing. We can maybe try try it in 1 minute or so, and then we go on. Write a function square of x that calculates and returns x to the power of 2. So you have the input
I
x.
think that calculates is misspelled. It's a dyslexic version there.
Oh yes. Calculates. Yeah, it's misspelled 2 times. Thank you.
I can't even English anymore. I make so many mistakes in English
Oh
now.
wow, I misspelled it like 3 times.
That's perfectly fine.
So I'll give you maybe a minute to just try it out and get a lot of error messages and get frustrated. And then for the ones that are done, we also have 2 more exercises that use a bit more, where you need to use a bit more, like for loop and if loops. Let's see. But how it is, like, it's quite straightforward. I'm basically just writing def and call the function square of x. So x is my input, and then I'm reusing x in the body of the function, or not. If I'm not reusing it, then I don't need to assign an input. And I just say, okay, what I'm actually calculating is y, which equals x times x, and then I return y. And then I can calculate the square of 4. Oh yeah, no, it's obviously not. Yes, then I return the square of 4, and actually, so I calculate the square of 4, and it's 14. So it works. There is a Python function for that already, though. Maybe you can find it out what it is. Or I can show you. It's this one. For that is means 4 to the power of 2. But yeah, the next exercise was to write a function powers that calculates x to the power of y for a given x and y. And I just showed you that there is a Python function, but if you want to do it yourself, you can do it like that. For example, you again assign like a working variable. It's 1, not 0, because I'm going to multiply. It's kind of like the summing up just with multiplication. And I'm gonna go through everything in range for every I, and I'm actually not using I. I'm just doing things 5 times or 10 times, depending on how big y is. I multiply the result with x again, as per definition what the power is. And then I can do that. And 2 to the power of 5 is 32. And yeah, as I said, there's a function for that. And then I can also write a function to calculate the average. You can think about how to do it yourself. But why am I showing you this? It's because I want to go to the last point of today, and that is libraries. Let's use libraries for that. I just wanted to show you what that is, because there's a million libraries out there, and that's so cool about Python, for like really everything, for geodata, for data analysis, for AI, for text analysis, and so on. So, and it's open source, so a lot of people have written shit. But a library is essentially a set of functions that somebody else has written and published, and that you can use, like as the functions that you just wrote yourself. And one very famous one is Numpy. And to use a function, any function, I first have to install it, which again can be a bit tricky, but not in Colab. You can just write import numpy as np, that's the convention. You can say something else. And then you can use any function in Numpy by calling, for example, numpy arrange is a function that's similar with the range that we had, that creates a numpy array, which is a list from 0 to 9. And I also have the numpy mean. So it works the same as our function that we wrote ourselves. That was here, but we can just utilize functions that are already there. And for example, another thing, so there is like a big, for any library, you have a big documentation usually. For example, for Numpy, I can just look for Numpy codes, and it tells me everything. What are the inputs? It's the same, like similar as the functions that we wrote ourselves. It has inputs, it has outputs, it tells you what are the parameters, what does it return, and also examples. So that's like really cool. Usually, you can directly get examples. And here, for example, we're calculating the cos of L, which it doesn't do. I have to print it, I guess. And L is a list that I made. And then with another library that is called matplotlib, that's also fun to try out. I also import it. And then I can plot it like super easy, straightforward with just 2 lines of code. I get like a plot. So there is, yeah, really a lot of things to try out and to do super fast. I wrote a few more exercises that you can try out, but I think we will go back to questions. And also I just wanted to share, maybe we can start with that. I just wanted to share a few resources. If you're based in Sweden, then there is like public courses that the unis have for example, Python. It's like, of course, master's program, but also so-called freestanding courses that are like over a semester, not full-time, usually distant, and you get help, and it's free if you're an EU citizen, so check that out. We also have Yrkeshögskola in Sweden, which you probably know about. It has like a lot of programs that are more maybe hands-on. There's also a lot of online courses. I'm sure Coding for Immigrants has good resources there as well. And then there's also the new AI tools like ChatGPT. That's like a really good help, I think. Yeah, it's really great to use it. Again, like as with everything, use it as a brainstorming tool. So don't just copy the code. Don't just copy the code that, for example, ChatGPT gives you, but yeah, try to really see what does it mean. And then it's often not perfect. It often throws errors, but that's like a really good learning. And important, no, you won't learn how to code by just watching a lecture or watching somebody else code. So you really have to do it yourself. So as with everything, it's perfectly fine to copy code and to get inspiration, but try to like understand it. And there's also, I think, a lot of paid courses, but yeah, I think there's like a lot of material for free, and also help to get. I have more resources in the next slide, but it's more about like keeping the motivation up. That, you know, you need maybe a bit more structure. And for that, it's really great, I think, if you either do a course or if you get something that you really want to solve and really work with that, find like a small project that really interests you. And as I said, there's a lot of resources. Any of these libraries has a lot of documentation. There are example galleries for data visualization. There are blog posts on Medium, where people have done a lot of things. Like if you look for Strava data extraction or something, then you will get a lot of Medium and you can copy and paste. Stack Overflow is also kind of like a search engine for code, and Kaggle has a lot of data data analysis AI problems. Yeah, that was what I wanted to share with you. Is there any questions? We have 1 minute. Um,
Any questions? It's okay. Finnish, Swedish. I'm not Scandinavian, so I'm like same thing. But
oh yeah, thank you for sharing all the yeah, I think those like if you're based in Sweden, and those like distance courses can be really great because you actually get credits
yeah.
and tutorials and stuff.
I think with Full Stack Open, you get credits from Helsinki
Ah,
University
okay.
as well, and it can be applicable to any university depending on the credits you get. So I would definitely check out Full Stack Open. But it, like Alexandre said, it's not Python. Yeah, so
I mean, it probably applies to any language, right?
I've seen so much crossover between JavaScript and Python today, and it's really nice because Python is so much cleaner. In my opinion, Python is much cleaner than JavaScript. So,
and there's a lot of that can also be a disadvantage, right? But to get started, it's easier, I think.
yeah, it is. But I just want to reiterate what you said that first of all, don't copy and paste code from ChatGPT because the code, at least for me, is wrong all the time. But I work in a very specific system called ServiceNow. So the type of scripting I'm doing in JavaScript is very specific to that system. But 9 times out of 10, it's wrong. You're not going to learn. The only way you're going to learn if there is a bunch of red on your screen. So don't be afraid of the red. Don't be afraid of the errors. They are scary though.
Yeah, that's really how you get like you just make less and less errors. You still have to look up things all the time. So you're just getting better at fixing errors, not
And
really
then when,
better at writing code.
no, exactly. And then when there's no errors, you're like, something has to be wrong. So you get someone else to test it, and they're like, yeah, I see the problem here. Copilot Cody or Codium.
That's Copilot is from GitHub, and I think I haven't tried it. It's supposed to be cool. It's you have to pay it though. Codeon is the one that I've been using. I think Codeon, something like that, which is for free in Visual Studio. So you have to have like Visual Studio, and it's okay. Like as Brittany says, it makes mistakes, but yeah, it's it's good for getting started.
Yeah, exactly. It's good for getting started or explaining how a function works. But other than that, it's not the best for writing the actual code. So,
oh, cool. We're getting some tips here. That's great.
sorry?
We're getting some tips here in the chat for AIs helping us how to code.
I'm too old school, I think. No, I just work in a system where none of it's open source. So the AI hasn't indexed the data. Oh, Klaudia, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
This was fantastic. I will share the notebook one more time in the chat, but then I will also share it on our Discord.
Yeah, you can also share the Anaconda. Yes, this is the whole like drive where I have the presentation, the notebook, and also the solutions to the notebook, the solution notebook. Yes, Anaconda. So it's a way to install Anaconda. I think it's really, really, as I said when I worked in like Python beginners things or data science tutorials. It always took like so much time to get everybody started. So I think it's really, really difficult to give like generic advice, and also help with bug fixing. But Anaconda, through Anaconda, so you download or through the terminal get Anaconda, and then it installs Python for you, and then you can start Jupyter Notebook, for example. I think you don't need Anaconda if you have VS Code. I think it you have like Python in VS Code. If it works, I think like VS Code, yeah, you can download it there directly. But yeah, you can find a lot of tutorials on how to install Anaconda if you want. It's also a way of keeping track of like all the dependencies and all the libraries and stuff. I'm unfortunately not don't know so much more. I just try to keep up with it. But yeah.
My cat is crying, so I'm gonna go very soon. But I just want to say thank you again. Unfortunately, so for those of you who were new to Coding for Immigrants, my name is Brittany. I'm the founder of this group. Not only are we a Code Academy community, we're also a nonprofit based here in Stockholm. We try to regularly host these digital workshops. But me and my co-leaders are busy people, so it doesn't always happen. But thanks to very generous people like Klaudia, we at least have one a month. So I shared a link to our Discord in the chat. Please join us there, where I will keep you all updated on things we're working on. We're currently working on our website project. We're going to have a hybrid meeting to map out the stories for our website project at the beginning of next year. So January the 10th, if you would like to join. Otherwise, we're in our Discord community. We're always offering feedback, advice, tips. I think the most recent advice that Matt gave, Matt helps lead this group, as well as Madison, but Matt has a lot of experience working as a software engineer in the UK as well as here in Sweden. And some of the recent questions people had was about how much should I charge for freelance rates. So it's a bit more intermediate, but we also help people who are just starting out on their coding journeys as well. How can I learn more about this? Where's the best place to learn? Where's the best place to practice? Can you take a look at my code and tell me why it's not working? We can help you with that, but we also try to help with salary negotiation, or I've been given this sort of project at work, but it seems a bit more advanced than for a junior developer, or whatever my role describes. How should I approach this? Or is it too much? And then you have people that have been working in the industry for over a decade saying, yeah, they're trying to get away with not paying a senior developer. So how much Python do I need to know before I can start looking for a job? That is a great question.
I think it depends on what kind of job. I mean, a lot of those data engineering jobs require not so much, that you know Python probably, but more that you have like a degree in